It was this corner right here of South 10th and Springfield, Newark, New Jersey, that I left the corner for good. And it's where I beat the trap at. And so I tell this story about me being up 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. I had my dope route, was selling heroin in the hood, and we had customers coming from over here, this little dead end strip. We had customers coming from down the street, and I was literally standing right here on the corner. And so I'm just by myself, you know, kind of just watching the operation. And my workers were coming down this street right here on Springfield. And I was watching one of my workers walk away. He was, you know, one of the blood gang members. He had a red flag on him, had a gun on him. And I was just standing here, and I was literally just daydreaming. I'm just like, yo, if I keep this up, where I'm gonna be when I'm 30? And I was approaching 25 years old. And I literally pictured myself lying on this curb with my head bleeding. So I could picture myself in jail with green bars and a tan suit on, or I picture myself laying on the ground, my head bleeding next to this curb. And I tried to reimagine that picture. I was like, if I only could see myself in 5 years doing the same thing, being in prison or being murdered in an early demise, I was like, yo, I gotta do something different.
We're celebrating and about to do a ribbon cutting on the Legacy Center in the great city of East Wayne.
Our next guest went from slanging crack to selling houses.
Wow. The third chance that life God gave me to come back and empower his people.
With Jay Morrison and Miss New Jersey, who lives in Brooklyn. She's looking to make the
Justice for all people! Justice for all people! Justice for all people! Justice for all people! Wake up!
We're back with the social activist Jay Morrison. He's leader of the YMC Community Coalition. What do you make of the...
There, me know is Jay, Mr. Real Estate. What's the son on the...
Activist Jay Morrison is also here.
It's up to us to be the new family CEOs with a new message, a new vision for our family.
With me now is the leader of the YMC Community Coalition, Jay Morrison.
How many tax advantages?
Now, after hearing these job descriptions, I have to ask, do you all still want to continue?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Value is you know more about real estate and opportunities than the average person knows.
So when you talk about selling cocaine,
the story of a young man, he walked away from life as a drug dealer to become a six-figure player in the real estate game.
I was thinking about what all of you thought about me. I was thinking about what the Joneses thought about me. My last name ain't Jones.
Realtor Jay Morrison is here with the 5 must-ask questions.
I want my daughter's kids to be like, granddaddy did this thing. Granddaddy left that shit behind. Imagine that. Your kids staying in one of your apartment buildings, staying in one of your stores, carrying on a family legacy.
I knew Jay was gonna be my husband the day I met him. Woo, baby Morrison is kicking. I was gonna put on makeup and get all dolled up for you guys and put my face on and put on a cute outfit. But the way this 36 weeks of pregnancy is set up, y'all gonna get what y'all gonna get. And we're gonna do this interview, no makeup on, in my Atlanta Influences Everything t-shirt in my sweats. So that's just what it's gonna be. The day I met him, we met in his office. He had this little shoebox office in Midtown, and we had a meeting. It was supposed to be a business meeting, and the whole time we were giggling and smirking and smiling at each other, and just like, my girlfriend who introduced us, she was kicking me under the table because of the energy. And when I left that meeting and got to the parking lot, before I even got to my car, she called me like, bitch. Girls were like, bitch. She was like, that's your husband. I said, that's my husband. I knew day one that was gonna be my husband. We talk to baby Morrison all the time. Jay has this chant, he gets real close to my stomach, he goes, Kobe, Kobe, Kobe. That's his thing, he does every night. And I will tell her that, and God willing, her dad will be able to tell her exactly who he is, but she will know that her dad is a true warrior, a true change agent, a true game changer in every sense of the word. Ain't no fluff, ain't no faking. There's not too many people walking around here that possess the gifts and the talent that Jay Morrison possesses. And I will say that, wife or no wife, period.
Hi, Jay.
Hey, Nish.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
You have a 40th birthday approaching very soon. How does it make you feel that you have surpassed what you once thought?
Excited, elated, blessed. Yeah, it's like 40 in my world is a big deal.
And tell me a little bit about just birthdays in general. Are birthdays a big deal to you?
Historically, no. I kind of probably downplay my birthdays usually, and I always work on my birthdays. I feel like it's the best day to work. I don't feel like there should be time off just because you've aged or seasoned a little bit. But it does mean a lot to be turning 40, as you mentioned, when really in my world and where I come from, Biggie Smalls said it best, being broke at 30 gives you the chills, and most of us never even thought that we would make it to 30. And so to surpass 30 and now be approaching 40, which is called the second half of life.
Yeah.
Super excited about what God's got for me and what's to come.
They say that you can't really choose your family, right? Your family chooses you. Can you talk about the family that chose you?
Judith, this is great. I don't want to startle you.
You did.
I'll leave then. Hey.
Oh, baby, I miss you.
Miss you too. The family that chose me were the Robinsons. I was born in Robinson, actually. And my family was from a lower income area, Somerville, New Jersey. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of stuff surrounded around athletics, but we grew up in poverty, or at least knowing, certain parts of our family kind of broke out of it, but for my mom and immediate family, we grew up in poverty, below the poverty line. And we understood what struggle was. And I came up from a family of hustlers. My mom was a hustler and a drug dealer at one point, and my uncle was, and my stepfather was, and my biological father was, and my grandfather was, and my aunt was. And so making our way through the streets or getting how we live, which is part of our environment. Yeah, so what's special about my mom and I's relationship is that she literally chose me. Like, she wanted to have a baby and she wanted to have a boy.
I was happy. I wanted to have a baby, as weird as it may sound. At the time, I was just 17. I was happy but concerned. My mom didn't want me, to have a baby at 17, of course. And we were going to abort Jermaine. I just strongly believe that God had other plans. And I just feel like that idea for me to have a baby, at age 17 was from God, even though it might not have suited everybody else, but I wanted to have a baby.
Most African-American males, they fall under this statistic of being in poverty, and with that, there's other elements that come with that. Can you talk about a traumatic experience about the sexual abuse that you encountered also at a young age while growing up?
Well, with my mom, in the early 80s, hustling and shaking and moving and trying to make a way, she also had her own addiction to drugs, to cocaine, to marijuana, to drinking, and just the lifestyle, right, in the 80s. So she would, have different babysitters. I have aunts babysitting me and others in the family babysitting me, and Miss Bay, who was like a adopted grandmother, she would babysit me, rest in peace. And for one summer particularly, I had a close family kind of associate relative. They were actually a sister of my mom's sisters, right? And so my grandfather had 13 kids by 7 different women.
Oh, wow.
So I got a lot of aunts and uncles and different families and different cousins, right? And co-cousins and all that. And so that summer, a 16-year-old, approximately, kind of cousin or almost sister-in-law of my mom's, was babysitting me. I probably was somewhere around seven years old, eight years old. And that summer, she introduced me to sex. You know, it was, you know, a common thing, and I, you know, again, remember it vividly, where she would, her parents would leave, the adults would leave the house, and she literally, when the door closed, would look at me like, you know what time it is. So with my cousins, I was like, there was a lot of wetness, like, on me. And they were like, oh, that means you would get her pregnant, or you got her pregnant, or something like that. And like, I had no idea what any of that was.
When was the point where you realized this is not right?
I didn't really know. What I didn't know was I could get in trouble. So I remember wanting to speak to somebody about it, and I almost brought it up on my grandma's porch with my mom, my aunt, my grandmother there, and I was just like, nah, this is too much, like, I'm gonna get in trouble.
Not until really recently. And it was pretty mind-blowing who and when, and the fact that I didn't know. So I think about it often now that he told me about being molested. So, you know, it's weird and it's hurtful, and I always thought we were close enough that he would tell me back then, but he didn't, for probably the same reasons all the other kids don't mention it, you know, for fear of getting in trouble themselves.
So I'm not too familiar with Jay's experience with sexual abuse. Until recently, when he kind of exposed it to the world, we never really talked about it. It really just struck me as something that was like, wow, that may happen more often than we actually think, right? This is Jay Morrison who's saying that it happened to him, and the way he told the story, it was vivid enough.
So I knew there was some wrong in it.
Yeah.
I didn't know to place the wrong on me, but I didn't have the confidence in my family to be able to really come out and expose this, and really didn't do so for decades.
I too am a survivor of sexual abuse. I explained to Jay that I was molested for 10 years, and he was vulnerable enough and opened up to me about his experience, which a lot of men don't do. And I think his vulnerability and his transparency actually made me love him even more, because he was so willing to be open and share his experience in detail. And I thought that it was amazing how he didn't allow that experience to just define him, right? And he did the work, the self-work, to understand his kinks and quirks and all the, like, his sexual needs and desires, how he correlated and related to his molestation. I thought that was really cool that he did that self-work and identifying these things. And we had a mutual bond about it because we both experienced the same thing.
You're raised in a predicament where you don't have a lot. Something in your mind tells you that needs to change. And you decide to find a way to make money. You've been hustling since you were little, doing paper routes and things like that for your mom, doing your own little grinds here and there, but you realize at 15, I need to change this predicament. And you start to sell drugs. Can you talk about how you were introduced to that?
Yeah, I think my mind was made up from like 7, that, you know, I genuinely, internally despised poverty and not having a lot. Like, I hated having to beg for 50 cents for a pretzel, $1 for a slice of pizza, free lunch in schools, food stamps, like everything, the roaches in apartments, the no cable, the lights off, the heating the house with the boiling water on the stove, or heating the house with the oven, right? Like all that, I just genuinely, and seeing what my friends or others in the neighborhood may or may not have had, or I hated it. Like, it was like a real deep hate. And so I internalized it very, very early. And when I got of the ability to kind of break out the house and move around a little bit, and as I was seeing like guys in my neighborhood and older cousins start to make money, start to make bank, and you know, start seeing their lifestyles change. These are guys that I knew that grew up poor like me, and it's like, hey, well, why do you got the new Tommy Hilfiger jacket, and why do you got the new? And it's like, you know, and I'm still here with hand-me-downs, and like when everyone had the regular Timberlands, I had like this like outlet pair of black low-top Timbs. Like that was like my back-to-school sneakers, right?
Yeah.
So I made up my mind then, and I was introduced to weed was my first run at selling drugs, actually in 6th grade.
Wow.
One of my 8th grade guys who lives in my apartment complex, he gave me a little bit of weed to sell in 6th grade. I had no luck. No one in 6th grade was smoking weed at that time, but I tried.
Yeah.
Later on, my first time I remember being on the block with a couple yellow top vials of crack, customers was coming out of left and right in the woodworks, and we made like $1,000 like in an hour.
Wow.
And it was just like, oh snap, we on. So that was kind of my introduction to it.
There was an episode though a little while later when I knew, and you know, the lifestyle spoke for itself. The pager, the jump up in any time of the day, you know, like that. And then, you know, he kind of lost his mind, and you know, he didn't do drugs, but selling them is an addiction in itself. Perhaps there was a part of me that pretended I didn't know. I may have heard, you know, some things, and he did not have my undivided attention at that time. And even my father, when he visited, he told Jermaine around the time of his graduation from the alternative school, Votech, because my father, you know, had that same history. He could see what was happening, and he told my son, told Jermaine, that, you know, if you don't knock it off, the police are coming.
And there were some key people while you were involved in the drug dealing. Rick is one of them. Can you talk a little bit about Rick's role in your life as you sold drugs?
Yeah, my best friend, the best man at my wedding, Rick Fontaine, he was someone I met at 17 years old as I had kind of elevated in the drug game and stopped working for other people, found my own connect, and now I had people working for me. So in just 2 years in the business, I had to end up really running my own operation and started actually taking my operation out of state.
The first day I met Jay, we were in Virginia Beach, and a mutual friend of ours at the time, one of my other best friends, was like, yo, we got this kid down here, you know, he's from a small town in Jersey, and he's getting money and he wants to get into the party business. At that time, I was kind of in the party business. I was throwing concerts, parties, spring break events, and our mutual friend was like, you know, you should meet this kid. So he was staying in a room with like a couple of our other homeboys, and my homeboy introduces us. I say what's up, and we just hit it off right from there.
So you are really at the height of glory as far as like all that selling drugs has been able to give you, what you've been able to accumulate as a result of that. You're driving nice cars, you've got bricks of money holding up, just really living the best, living your greatest lifestyle. Can you talk a little bit about that specific trick and how you went from wearing a Cuban link around your neck to wearing platinum cuffs? Tell us that story.
Yeah, so, you know, hustling in Baltimore, I actually was going back and forth, and then one time in New Jersey, my biological dad was getting high. And one of my customers, right, she hit me up and was like, your father's in town. And I haven't seen him since I was like 9 years old. She's like, your father's in town and he wants something. So I was like, all right, cool. So she had linked us, and he wanted 2 for $35, right? So I gave him a deal, that was my deal, 2 for $35. I sold 20s. And he came back and was like, son, what you just gave me, he was like, that goes for double in Nebraska. That's where he lived most of my life, he lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I was like, all right, bet. Was making another trip en route to Nebraska when I was on my way to New York, leaving Baltimore. I had a train already scheduled from Washington, D.C. to go to Nebraska. This is for what I thought was gonna be my last flip. I got notified from my daughter's mother that she was pregnant, and that I decided that I didn't want to be in prison like my dad was, my stepfather was when I was young.
Yeah.
That I wanted to be here for my daughter, so I was literally quitting the game. I had some money saved up, I had a nice run,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is going to be my last flip. I'm gonna get a quarter kilo from New York, 250 grams. Off that, I'll make about 25,000. I'm gonna put that up, and I'm gonna go to college, get a job, and get done, and raise my daughter. And so I booked my last trip to Nebraska, my last flip in the game, went to New York, got one of my roommates, Mel, to drive me up to New York. He was a college kid. He dropped me off uptown Harlem. That day just happened to be like a TNT day. The Jump Out Boys and Narcos, it was like the hot day on the block, right? Like dynamite, like it was a hot day on the block. And so, I mean, literally there were cops parked on every corner. So I'm literally walking through the fires, not like it's hidden and like, no, there's like, I'm watching people locked up across the street. Like I'm watching cops round people up. I'm watching like, you know, and my connect told me, he was like, hey, Poppy, it's hot today. Can you come back? Can you come back? I'm like, no, I can't come back. I got a trip. So I was in one of these stores. It used to be like a phone booth. And Pyle had me, that's my connect name's Pyle. He had me upstairs. He gave me the work. He like, all right, Poppy, go. And I come out in such a haste that I figure I could get to Riverside from any street. So I just bust the first right I could make because the cops was like just so heavy everywhere. And I thought I was invincible, right? I had a lot of close calls. I never had gotten locked up for drugs. And I just felt like it was my destiny to be a great drug dealer. And so my arrogance and my youthful pride, or whatever you want to call it, I went, I caught my work. And in my haste of trying to get out of the spot quick, I come down this street, I'm thinking I'm going towards my car. You know, I got my jacket on, trying to look cool, and just trying to look, you know, like I ain't just buy a quarter kilo of Coke. I went the wrong way and didn't realize that I thought that all parallel number streets on Broadway in New York went to Riverside Drive. And I know I made it pretty far down before I realized, but one of the streets actually goes downhill instead of uphill. And the downhill street I went down couldn't get me to my car. So I'm like, shit. I gotta walk past the police again to get to my vehicle. I tied it up in my do-rag. I stashed it in the alleyway. But people were out, so I tried to do it on the low. And walked away like a few steps and was like, nah, somebody gonna get me. I'm getting my shit. Went back, got my work, went back around the corner to get to the car on Riverside. And as soon as I got in the car, my partner was like, yo, the boys just came, the cops. And he was like, I told him to screw off. I'm like, bro, why would you do that? Like, you know, I'm up here, you know, trying to get work. Why would you, you know, have a confrontation with the cops? And so I got in, like, let's go, let's go. So after we pulled off, the cops immediately pulled us over right here. And they literally asked us to step out the car. So I get out the car and I'm compliant with the cops. So he's like, put your hands on the car. So I go to put my hands on the car slowly and I try to jet and brake, and the cop grabbed the back of my jacket. He tackled me right here. He tackled me on the ground, started punching my ribs, trying to, and I had the bag of Coke in my pocket, so I brought the brown bag out my pocket. I'm on the ground, and peace king, and I'm slinging the Coke everywhere. The cops is over me, and I tried to throw it over the fence, up from the ground, and hit the top of this fence, and it fell back down. I swear to you, this fence had to be here at least 20 years, since 1998. So I threw the bag of Coke, top of the fence, it fell on the ground. They handcuffed me, they took my pager. He threw my pager, I remember it. He took my pager and he threw it over there. He took my belt off, he threw it. They locked me up, put me in the blue and white. And that's how I got caught in the trap. So I thought that I would get probation. You know, it's my first time as an adult. You know, my first charge is nonviolent. I figured I'd get probation, maybe some days in the county jail or something like that. So I was really optimistic about my, outcome, potential outcome. But when I went to my court and bail hearing, two things happened. One, the judge asked for an exsurity exam for my bail, which means they want to assure or really establish where the money came from for my bail. So my bail was $50,000, which I had the money, but could not prove where the money came from, right, to get bailed out. And so that was a shocker because I couldn't get bailed out. I thought I could bail out immediately and I'd be out in the streets, so I was like already been optimistic. Then when I went to court and given the guidelines for what's called an A2 felony, so having over a quarter kilo of cocaine is an A2 felony, and I got a B felony for the loaded .38 handgun. And their first offer to me was 3 years to life in prison. So I remember going back to my, you go to court and you get these offers and you go back to your dorm, in the holding cell or whatever respective jail. And I went to the older guys like, yo, what's 3 years to life? Like, what's that mean? I never even heard nothing like that in New Jersey. It's not a New York thing. Yeah. Like, what is 3 years of life in prison? And essentially it is, you would have to serve 3 years. You have life probation. And if you got any infractions while you're serving your 3 years, they can always extend your charge. Or if you got any trouble on probation, they can continue to give you more and more time. So I would literally be in the system for life, or until I completed an extensive period of probation of 10 or more years. And I was just like, yo, this is crazy. Like, I literally go to prison at 18 years old, not come home until I'm 21 or beyond. So that's where reality really came crashing down. Like, yo, bro, this is real. You got yourself into something.
We had conversations about how to survive and how to get rich. I think coming from what we come from, being a trap, we don't really think. When you're young, you just don't have the information, and we didn't know. We kind of knew it was wrong because you avoid the police, so you know it's wrong, but you don't know, the damage until you're wise enough or you have enough information to realize what we're doing is damaging. So yeah, we never were like, oh, let's go be bad guys. We were like, look, let's escape the trap.
I just remember being in the living room and the phone ringing, but I just remember being informed and calling my supervisor at work and telling her that my son was in trouble, an emergency with my son, I said, and I had to go. I was actually home on lunch. And so I called my job to say that, and she said, well, you can't go, you have to come back in. And I said, well, we'll talk about what I can't do when I get back because I have to go. His oldest daughter's mother was pregnant at the time. He was just turned 18. He was on Rikers Island, and I was already under a lot of stress for a lot of different reasons, and I just knew we had to go. And we got to Rikers Island, someplace I've never been before, and he walked through the door with the orange jumpsuit on, and I just lost it. I just broke down, and I kind of visualize it. I see him clearly coming through the door, and then after that, I just don't really recall that much. I do recall, because I was hugging him, like holding him and crying, and the guard was saying, okay, you can't, and his stepfather was saying, you can't, so it was just really bad.
We had sky pagers back then where we would page each other. So we would keep quarters on us, run to a payphone, or Jay and I, we had cell phones back then before like a lot of people had them. We had these big Motorola phones, and we had these StarTAC phones. And I would page him, or he would page me before he would leave to go up to New York to, meet the dude that we was doing business with. And he paged me, he was like, I'm on my way. So when I would get out of class, if I had my StarTAC on me, I would page him. And when you called Sky Pager back then, there was an operator who would answer, and they would type what you say, and then they would send the message to the pager. So I started texting them like 911, where you at? Like how you would send a text message nowadays. I'm telling the operator like, call me ASAP, call me 911. So I'm panicking, I'm blowing the Sky Pager up, he didn't respond. So one of our friends that he ended up getting in trouble with had his brother page me. I called the number back, and then that's how I found out. And then not too long after that, Jay had paged me or called me. About that time, I think he called me and told me what had happened.
After probably my 3rd month in prison, and after the bail denials and just going back and forth to court, it was like, oh snap. And then me being in a position where they gave me an opportunity to plead guilty to a 1 to 3, which is 1 year to 3 years, which is the charge of the plea which I took. I'm like, yo, this is real. Like, I'm really in jail, I'm really locked up, and bro, it's time to get used to it. And so a few months in is where I really, at first you're kind of on the fence, like you just think about home. You think about home, and again, my daughter's mom was pregnant, trying to come home with my baby, and trying to come home to real food, my old lifestyle, right, my freedom, my apartment. And at some point, a few months in, it did hit home like, nah, this is your new home, and you're gonna learn how to bid, and you're gonna learn how to maneuver and get through Rikers Island, upstate New York, and get through jail.
So you do your time, you get out. Prison is supposed to be rehabilitation.
Not at all.
You get out, you would think maybe you learn your lesson, but you go back to what you know. You go back to the streets. Why?
Because prison was more criminal school than it was correctional institution. So while in prison, I just networked with other drug dealers and car thieves and stick-up kids and met new connects. And so I really learned, especially being in New York, I learned a faster pace way of hustle, and I learned a better way of selling drugs. And so I went home with a plan. I made a business plan while I was gone. And one of my OGs, AKA mentors, White Boy Eddie from Staten Island, he gave me his blueprint for how he took over his area in Staten Island, and I brought that to Somerville, New Jersey. And when I came home, I said to myself, you know, my daughter was born while I was in prison, missed my family and all that. So I said I'm gonna give myself, 2 months off. I came home with some money, so I didn't come home broke. I came home with some money, but I said I'm gonna give myself 2 months off, and then I'm gonna pick back up in the game. So I came home in November, I think November 4th of 1999, and I, chilled. Enjoyed family, enjoyed my daughter, all that.
His lifestyle wasn't laid out to me explicitly. I can't even say how I felt after I learned, because I kind of always knew. It wasn't like a huge secret. I think that if he's convinced himself of something, then it's really hard for him to rewire himself. I was an only child for 7 years, and I'm pretty intuitive, and so there wasn't like some big reveal or anything. So yeah, it really wasn't a surprise. It all adds up. It all makes sense.